the same time. Okay, so this is actually, we did a workshop on this in January. It's been expanded. It became a 3-hour workshop at SUNY just last week, and we've condensed it back down a little bit. Judy Littlejohn and I had done the longer workshop, and this is a condensed version of this. Here is a code if you want to get a copy of the slides. Although you could also get it from that first document that I shared. And in either case, the link, well, this link should give you a copy that you can edit and use on your own if you'd like, if it works correctly. And you can either type in that URL or aim your phone at it and then just add it to your Google Drive. And it will say, do you want to make a copy of this? Say yes. It's a nice way of distributing it so that you can edit it yourself if you choose to, or delete things you're not interested in, etc. And the recording is going. Good. Okay, so GPTs. GPTs are custom chatbots created using ChatGPT. And once you've created them, you have the option of using it either just yourself, sharing it with anyone with a link, which is a good thing to do if you're going to create something that's custom to your specific course. For example, one type of GPT might be a course assistant that has information on your due dates, that has your syllabus and other things and rubrics and other things all trained on that, but you'd want a different one for each of your sections of the course. So you don't want a generic one that's going to be wrong if students share it from section to another. So if you want to do something that's specific to a specific set of users, such as a given section of a course, you share it with just people who have the link and embed it in Brightspace, or you can make it public if it's a general purpose GPT that perhaps anyone might be interested in doing. To create one, though, you do need a paid account. I don't know, and I haven't experimented with this because I've had a paid account for a while now, but I'm not sure if you could create one with a paid account and then do it for a month and then leave it behind. I suspect the GPT probably goes away, but I don't know. I can't be sure of that, but students do not need a paid account. And that's why when GPTs first became available, I didn't use them because originally only people who had paid accounts would be able to access it. If you create a GPT that you share with students, they do not have to have a paid account. The free version of ChatGPT will work with them. And the reason why we're doing this in GPT is, first, it's the cheapest way of doing this, as we'll see a little bit later. And the other is, when students are polled in terms of what tools they use, while I know SUNY is pushing Copilot as their preferred way of doing all these things, ChatGPT gets 20 times as much use. Literally, it's used by 20 times as many students. So, you know, it's a big difference. It's 95% to 5% basically, just between those two. And Claude also gets a fair amount. I don't know the exact proportions, but it is what students are most likely to use anyway. So why would you create a GPT instead of interacting directly with an AI tool? And, you know, that depends on your use. You might want to create a custom prompt, you know, that you just use every time you want to use it. But one of the things that people who were in the reading group this spring saw is that the best prompts tend to be long prompts that contain a lot of detail. And the more detail you put in a prompt, the more precise and the more precise your results will be, and the less likely it is that you'll get hallucinations. So it's more likely that it will be, you know, what you want it to do. And you don't want to put in those long prompts again. You could always save your history and jump back up through thousands of lines of interactions if you use this regularly, or you could create a GPT that would allow you just to do it by clicking on the prompt, basically. So it's sort of like a macro. It's just doing a lot of things automatically, pretty much. So if you're using it just for yourself, if you're going to repeat something and do it a lot, one of the examples we talked about, I think it was yesterday, was if you're doing some work converting your course to be ready for Title II, which goes into effect next April. One of the things you might need to do is tag some images if you haven't done that in some of your materials. And one of the things I created, and that was shared then, is a simple chatbot that will let you upload any number of images, and it will generate alt text following the guidelines used for accessibility and so forth. So we're not going to do the discussion. That was something we did when we did a 3-hour session. But in any case, it's if you want to share the GPT with other or share the thing with other people so they can use it, it could be really helpful. And
can we pause for just 1 second,
sure,
John? So
sorry.
like if you haven't seen very many GPTs, there is a way to sort of go to ChatGPT and look at several of the ones that have been created already. So we'll get there in a little bit.
Yeah, that's one of the very next things. But two of the main reasons why I think it might be useful is to generate a personalized Socratic tutor for your class, where students can use it to support their learning instead of as a replacement for learning. And another is if you want to train it, working on your syllabus and similar things. So if you're creating something, another purpose of using GPTs is for instructional support, where we just had a session where some of these things were talked about with Nick Sard in terms of how he's using it. But you could create a custom version of GPT that would generate active learning activities, where you could put in, if you're using slides, Google Slides or PowerPoint slides, you could upload them and ask it to generate some active learning activities of a given duration or a certain number of them and so forth for a class of your size and at its level. And that can be built into a GPT. You could have it used to generate rubrics, which is a really common use that faculty use and instructional designers use GPTs for, or use AI tools for. To generate, if you're building a new course or programs, you could have it generate learning objectives for that. Betsy Berry at Wake Forest used it to develop a whole program at the institution where she asked, we'd like to introduce a new program. What are some of the courses that we should include? And then she asked it to develop learning objectives aligned with the overall structure of the program by course. And then, had it design syllabi for each of the courses and so forth. You could also have it to, take your syllabus and make sure that you're using inclusive language and so forth. There's a lot of things you can do with that. If you personally, some people might use it for other things. We talked about this a little bit in January in another session. You could generate, if you have specific dietary restrictions, you could have it generate things that align with your dietary restrictions. Or you could have it be a travel planner where you can ask for things that you might want to do while you're visiting a certain thing, a certain place. Okay, but we're going to go through one example of a course Socratic tutor. And what I'd like you to do is to follow along with this. And actually, it's probably easier, but log into ChatGPT, which is just chatgpt.com. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'll bring this over to the screen. Once you're logged in, and you can log in using your Oswego or any other email account, that's probably the easiest and quickest way to do this. If you have a paid account, well, whether you have a GPT account or not, you can look at GPTs, and that's what Stephanie was talking about just a minute ago, that if you'd like to explore GPTs, and in fact, you need to do this to get over there anyway. Let me get this back. Come on, fit the size of the screen. Why is this not fitting the size? Okay, let me try this. I haven't been using Windows this much. Okay, there we go. Okay, so when you log in, one of the things you see is this GPT thing right here. And this is where you can access the GPTs that have already been created. And there's some featured ones there, but they're also broken up by different categories. The DALL-E ones are ones that are image generation. Do you want to talk any more about the GPTs that are there?
My favorite ones are Planty, which helps give you advice about how to keep your houseplants alive. And I also really like the Coloring Book Hero. This is one that my daughter and I do a lot. For the Coloring Book Hero, Planty is the first one, but this one, the Coloring Book one, is cooler. You can describe like what you want a scene in a coloring book to look like, and then it will like generate that coloring book page for you, which my daughter thinks is super cool. And we find, like the more descriptive we are, the better the image is. So if you're looking for some recommendations, those are my two favorites.
Students' most favorite ones are the ones that will take output from GPTs and convert it and rewrite it into a form that's not detectable by AI checkers. Those tend to be the most commonly used ones. They're basically paraphrasing type tools that will,
Yeah, what's that one called? Like write like a human or something?
yeah, write like a human is one of-
humanize AI, I
yeah,
think
it's,
is
and if
one.
you look at the level of use on it, it gets a tremendous amount of use because it is used to avoid GPT detection. One of the reasons why we might want to use this though is to prevent students from resorting to those things, and to give them a little more support with actually learning the material. So there's a lot here, and I'd encourage anyone to play with those. And you don't need to have a paid account to experiment with the GPTs. And there are many, many of them and more of them by the day. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to create one. And we'll step through the process. And if you want to do a tutorial one, you may want to follow along with this. If you don't, you can do whatever you'd like in terms of this. It could be a personal thing. It could be instructional support. What we're going to do is we're going to start the lazy way or the easy way of doing it. And let's say we want to build a tutorial. I didn't download much before. I was hoping to do that in the last hour, but I didn't get a chance because the last session was really engaging and I didn't get to break away from it. So let's say I want to build a macroeconomics. This is the same example I used. I already have a PDF downloaded. So tutor. Let's say Socratic tutor. There. And then it's going to ask some questions. But one of the first things that we'll do, I think, this is not how I use it now, but this is how you might want to start using it. And it first asks you for a name, macro econ mentor. Let's go with that because, this is an hour, 50-minute session. So you could have an experiment. You could ask for something more clever or cute or whatever, or more engaging. But the next thing it'll do is it will generate an icon for you, which using DALL-E, and that's not bad. So we can look down and say it's going to ask us if that's okay as an icon. And again, if you don't like it, you could ask it to make it in a different style. You can give it feedback and revise it. Is that one okay?
Sure.
Let's say it's fine.
In the interest of time. Yeah.
We're going to, in the interest of time. Oops. Oh, that's not what
whoops.
I wanted.
Yeah,
wrong window. It's fine. There we go. Okay. So now see, we can look at it first just to see what it's actually doing. And here's where I would encourage you to. If you're not used to creating prompts, using a create tool is a good way of doing it because it does create the prompts for you. If you're used to prompting and you want to have something a little more refined, here we go. Look at this. This is what it's really doing. This is essentially a prompt that it's creating. Its role is to guide users through that. Question bank. Actually, this isn't bad. So if you use it, this is much better than the last time I did. And it's a lot like the one that I trained it for. So it may have learned from the earlier prompts. And we had a number of people do this at a workshop.
It's way more detailed.
So let's say this is okay. If you don't like something about this, well, one other thing that I usually will put in at the end is something like this. If students, let's say, ask topics. Oh, the other thing is, oops, Control Z is my friend here. How did that, why is Control? Because
I think it wasn't clicked in there. I think if you try it again, you might be okay.
Oh, come on. Okay, so use the attached PDF file as the source for all questions or for all responses. And I'm going to upload, it's going to take just a second or two. And also one other thing is if students ask questions unrelated to the macroeconomics, gently redirect them back to the topic. Okay,
Mm.
oops, except not, well, we probably don't want too macro. There we go.
Be funny if you said
Um,
like gently berate them.
I know. Yeah, especially when they make spelling errors. Okay, and then the next thing you would do is you would attach the file, which is, where is the file? Attachment.
Yep, go down. It was in the, keep going.
Oh, there we go,
Upload,
upload
yeah.
files. And I'm just going to go over to, these were things from yesterday's workshop. Let me just, I have it in Google Drive, but I don't have it there. So let me just quickly download this into download, and it will pop up here in just a second. It should pop up there in just a second. Okay, it's not quite there. Oh, it's moderately long. It's about 3.8. There it is. Okay. So I am going to open that and attach it, and that's going to be the source that it's going to use. If you've created your own materials, you could upload slides, you could upload documents you create, or whatever material is relevant. If there are crash course videos, for example, that are useful for your discipline, you could ask it in the text. You can't directly put a link to a video in the knowledge base, but you can in text ask it to also use content from there as part of its training database. And then at the bottom, what you can do is you can have it do web search, which you may or may not want to. If you want it to have access to current information or information beyond this, you could leave that in. If you want, you could turn that off so it would only use the material that it's trained on rather than going and whatever's in its training database, which is a lot. Or you could, here, the canvas gives you this 2-window approach. You could turn that off if you only want to have just one chat interface. And the 4.0 image generation is basically the current version of DALL-E. The code interpreter and data analysis would be useful if you want to do some Python or other types of programming, and then it will generate code for you. That's not going to be needed in this particular application, so we'll leave that turned off. There's some additional settings here. Oh, yeah. So here it's a question of where you want the data to train the models. If you don't want student responses to be used for training, you could uncheck that, and then at least in theory, it won't use it. I'm not sure, and I entirely believe that because, you know, they do like to train things on whatever data they can grab. The new actions here are if you want to connect to the API, publicly available APIs. So for example, if you're doing a travel planner and you're comfortable with generating a manifest for an API, you could connect to output from Yelp, for example. So it would look up restaurant reviews for restaurants that it's recommending based on those reviews. That's a little bit more programming involved in creating the manifest.
What's an API?
It's a, I don't remember the acronym, but basically it's a public-facing interface of a program that allows you to grab output from the program and use it in another location. It's the app, exactly, the application programming interface that allows programs to connect over the web without directly being linked in the code. Thank you. Good question.
Or the American Petroleum
No.
Institute.
Well, unless they have their own, the API's API. Okay, but one of the things I just kind of glossed over is when it did this, you notice it already put conversation starters in. Those show up, and on this is the thing where you're creating it. On the right hand, it shows what the user will be seeing, and what the user will be seeing is these questions. It generated some, which are pretty reasonable ones for intro macroeconomics course, and here we have it. And so we're going to now click on create. And this is where it's going to ask who wants access to it. And it puts your name on it. You could, here, I'll do it with anyone with a link. And then I will share that link in chat. So you could just try this if you'd like to see how it works. Or if you're creating your own, this is where you get a link created that you could share with the students if it's something specific to your course materials. If it's something you want to share more broadly across sections or with the world, you could just make it public and it would be in the GPT store. And anyone who is searching for a macroeconomics tutor would find this listed among all the other tools that are out there. And now I'm going to copy this and I'll drop it into the chat. Here we go. And now you can try it and ask it some questions and see how it does. And at this stage, one of the things you might want to do, and you could do this all the way through it, is try it. And if it's generating some output that is not what you want it to do, you can go back in and edit it and make a change and then click update, and it will give you a new version of it. As an example of that, when Judy and I were working on this for the CIT presentation, she created one specifically for her course with a syllabus. And one of the things she asked it was, what is due on February 12th or something like that? And it gave a correct response for one of the things that was due, but she actually had 3 separate things that were due on that date. And then she asked it as a follow-up question, when are these 2 things due? And then it responded with February 12th or whatever the date was. And then her next question, being a mother of a couple of children, was, have you learned from this? and it responded very politely, yes, I have learned and I will do better on this, and apologize, I'm sorry for my error. And then ever since then, she shared that with the classes, and ever since then, it has given completely accurate results. So sometimes the interactions it will learn from, especially if you check that, to learn from the experience, but you can also add it into more detailed instructions into the prompt. And to get back into it, you would just go to GPTs, find the GPT, and here you would see my GPTs. And these are just some of the ones that these are ones I've created recently. This was one we did at a conference based on some participation from other people there. We just did it on the spot because it was a 3-hour workshop. And so right now there's been 2 chats with us. So someone has tried this, which is good. Okay, so any questions? I'm sorry for rushing through it so much, but what I would like to suggest is that we use the rest of this time for you guys just to play with it, and we can chat about it and see, if you have any questions along the way. And maybe at the end, you could share what you created just to see. And here, I'd like to suggest that you take a look at that document again, which I think is right behind here and behind here. It is right here. And these are just some suggestions, but again, do not feel limited to these. Think about creating a Socratic tutor, maybe a course assistant, maybe a process coach for students breaking complex projects into a series of steps. Maybe a reflection guide if you want to help students improve their metacognition. You could also, if you want to create some role-playing activities for assignments, you could generate a GPT that will simulate a debate where they debate someone who takes the opposing side of an argument. You could have it do a role-playing chatbot that students could interact with, where you could ask students to interact and upload the transcript of that as an assignment, for example. You could, in counseling and medical practice, a lot of these things have been used to simulate interactions with patients or clients.
I have an example of that. I took a motivational interviewing class from UB, which is in the School of Social Work. It's a counseling and coaching technique. And the professor shared a link for a custom GPT. And I haven't tried it yet, but I had a classmate who said that she has used it quite a bit for practice and finds it useful.
And for example, one of the things you do, if you're dealing with people with various disorders, you could have it simulate maybe 10 patients and randomly select one that would then interact with the student, and then they would attempt to maybe diagnose the conditions or whatever. So it could be an interest, these things are being used for that. And and that's a great example. you know, if you're doing something with bargaining, if you're teaching a business course, for example, labor relations, you could have a chatbot that simulates bargaining, you know, for marketing or sales or something similar. And we've talked about a lot of these things before, but perhaps, you know, you could also use it to help meet UDL standards, or perhaps use it to meet Title II standards and so forth. And this is kind of a fun one that was talked about a little bit in the reading group this spring. Summarize comments in midterm or end of course feedback and suggest strategies for improvement to help address some of those things. One of the nice things about that is when people get feedback, those comments that are negative, the one or two of those, tend to have much more of an effect on you than all the positive ones. And this will generate a much more neutral overview of the results and so forth. So here's some things, and letter of reference writing assistant, I know some people have tried doing, and that could be really helpful at times. You could even submit it to a student, give a link to it, and have the student generate a draft of a letter of reference that you would then edit and make it your own. But or you could use a Google form to have, this is something that I think it was either Vichy Sathi or Kelly Hogan has done. They have a link on the website when students ask them for letters of reference. They teach a lot of courses, asking for some information about the number of courses, which courses they took, which semesters, and anything that was notable about the work that they had done in the class to help them serve as a reminder. And if that all goes into a spreadsheet, that could then be used to help draft at least a starting point of a letter that, you know, they could then revise and send out. They don't do that part of it. They were just using that to gather information to make it easier to recall some of the students because they have pretty big classes.
That's brilliant. I love that idea.
So there's a lot of things. So try creating your own. And if you have any thoughts or questions, concerns, or Stephanie, I've been talking far too much. I'm sorry.
I'm good. No, it's I mean, it's worth saying too that if you don't have the paid version of ChatGPT at the moment and you can't create your own, then it might be helpful to look through several of the GPTs that have already been created and see if there are some that might be relevant for you to use in your course, etc.
Thank you.
Pick one of those. We're not gonna make one. Right. I have to re-up my paid account.
And here's some links
One
to
of the
support
ones, yeah,
things
that
if you
you
want to try
organize
those.
are.
Do you have the link to that, John? So that here's links. Wait, is it in the chat? It is.
Yeah.
So there's that, yeah, there's any of those, or you can just scroll.
Now, by the way, when we put this proposal together for CIT, they wanted it to focus on Copilot because they love Microsoft for reasons that are completely unknown. And they want everyone to move from Google Apps to Microsoft. And so they wanted us to focus on Copilot. But to do Copilot, the Copilot has the same capabilities, but you have to pay $30 a month to have a Copilot Studio license. And you have to pay 1 cent each time a student accesses the GPT or their version of the GPT.
Wild.
And Claude has similar capabilities for $20 a month in creators, but anyone who uses it must pay $20 a month to have access to it. There's another one, which is PlayLab, which you have to go through a training program, and it's in beta testing, but that looks promising. One of the nice things about PlayLab is that you can see the source code that other people have used to create their chatbots. But there's a waiting list to get into that. So.
Yep, to that. Where's those GPTs? Yep.
By the way, this is a prompt I used to create one for my course under here.
I plan to try to use Planty because it can't hurt at this point.
Okay, yeah.
I got super frustrated because someone had suggested the Picture This app for plant care, but the free version of the app really doesn't, all it does, like if you take a picture of your plant, is it says like this plant is unhealthy. And I'm like, well, no kidding. Like, I can tell that it's unhealthy. Like, what can I do about it? So
If
that's
it
what,
dies, you don't have to water it.
I have the same situation. That's why I'm like, oh, I'll have to try that planting thing.
yeah, no, it's great. I love it.
So, Judith created one for her class, right?
She did.
So did she upload all her files into that upload file?
What she did was she did something very similar to what I did with the prompt. In fact, it was a shortened version of the one I used, but she also asked it to respond to student questions about due dates, study strategies, and other things. And that's great, but then you could only use it with the one section. And if you want, and then you would have to update it for each section of the course each semester. So it's up to you, you know. And in that case, you just create. So you could start with one, copy it all, and make another one, and each one would be section specific.
Okay. So she just typed it all in, or does she just share files like to her
Oh,
course for it to understand?
Basically, she did the same thing that I did, uploading the readings, because she was using an OER textbook as well. And and I also uploaded a link to, I mentioned using the
You can put in there
the video series from John Green and his brother, Crash Course.
Just
ask him to use those, and she just added her syllabus to provide the specific information. So each section, you'd upload the syllabus for that section, and it would be basically a course. Well, you could upload the rubrics and assignments and everything else if you wanted to. I'm lazier. I just did one, which will work as long as that OER textbook is the basis for what I'm teaching. And even if there's no OER text, if you mention the name of your text, it probably has somewhere gotten access to that information. There's some ethical issues there, but I only uploaded things that were OER or Creative Commons licenses. Did you create one?
No, my paid account expired.
Oh, because
I need to re-up it. Yeah. It's on my list. I'm thinking about creating one for the summer program. So
a GPT.
If I can get my act together.
And what would it do?
I think we're thinking about, because our reading and writing classes are going to have a lot of collaboratory features. So it would basically be sort of like an outside of class assistant for reading and writing class support.
Excellent.
So Allison is looking for GPTs that could potentially help with like her areas of interest.
Yeah, you can always use existing GPTs.
Yeah,
you don't have to create your own.
So it's so funny to me, without using a GPT, if you're just asking it in your regular chat to do an image, they look so much more crappier than if you're like in this image generator.
That's interesting.
Yeah, like they because you know how they spell everything wrong and whatever in the regular chatbot, but you use a GPT like the image generator, it's much more.
My guess is they probably asked it to check that all the letters are actual and spelling of image text that's stored as image is correct. So it's probably the equivalent of a very long prompt that automatically checks and verifies those things.
So like I just created like Department of Health Promotion and Wellness.
And all the letters are there in the right order, and there you go.
Hey.
Are you actually? You could share that and let people show. Oh. Share it with it.
I just created this logo. Oh, my audio is not on. Oh well, yes, they can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was created using an image generator GPT that was already there among the GPTs.
I like that.
And it asked me, what did it say? Is this logo meant for digital branding? I said all the above. Should we lean more towards professional, institutional, or modern and dynamic? I said professional, institutional, modern, and dynamic. Okay. All of them, just to see what it looked like. But it is funny because when you're in your regular chat, they don't come out like this. Oh, and then it says you have options, change the color scheme to brighter or more natural tones. It's funny, it automatically chose green too for SUNY Suite, so I wonder if that's,
It would be interesting to see if it matches the official hex code, so this is,
that would be
you know,
interesting.
Mhm.
it might, it might know where you're coming from. And by the way, when we gave this workshop at Oneonta last week, one of the persons developed a translator between Gen X speak and
Oh, you were
standard
talking
Oh,
English.
about
that's
that.
funny.
You know, so you translate the skibbities and other things into actual language. Okay, and Michelle shared a file.
I just threw in an academic support and it came up with the lighthouse and the lake and
Oh, that's pretty good.
green and
And where did the file go?
It's probably in the chat, is it on that side?
Yeah, but I'm not, oh, here we go, okay. And let me. Okay, so yeah, it's an expert birth chart GPT.
Oh, that's cool.
no, that's
Yeah,
Paul's.
that's like,
Be interested to
and
see
the
actually.
green and gold, like the light is the gold part, that's actually really cool. And the graduation cap as the top, that is like perfect. That's really good. You could use that.
Stephanie and Allison, should we use that?
Yeah, you
Oh,
can
and,
see it.
okay.
I
And Paul
can't see
noted
it.
there's an astrology GPT available.
Yeah, the top is the
Then maybe something on
graduation
learning
cap,
styles
the
too for that.
lighthouse. That's pretty good.
Yeah, actually, the learning support one is really good.
Yeah.
Good one, John.
Well, this is
Oh,
funny
I
because
was
that looks
wondering
like
if it was gonna give us
Syracuse
an
to me, the
example.
bottom half,
Sleeping.
doesn't that?
So it's been interesting about ChatGPT and stuff with my high schooler. Because, you know, I'm a convert. I'm like, I have to write this thank you note or something, like, give me a template, you know, get me started, right? So he's got all these things to do for like thank yous for scholarships and things. And I'm like, let's just throw it into ChatGPT and see what comes up. And then you could tweak it. And he's like, no, I can't touch ChatGPT. And I'm like, no AI. So he wouldn't even let me write a bio for his Instagram thing. I'm like, it's not cheating. It's about you. It's not like you're not being graded on your bio and Instagram, but he will not use it at all.
And it's great for brainstorming, to coming up with.
That's what
starting
I
point.
also used it, you know, when I had to condense something to a shorter word count. That was great. I was able to like, I need this at 500 words. And I said, and what did you leave out? So I could see what details were left out. And so it was really helpful.
And then you could even convert it into a haiku.
I don't think Carnegie wanted me to convert things to haikus. But
It might be the only one they get.
500 words. So they were, yeah, one thing I was doing was like 500 words. Another one was characters. I had to get it under a certain number of characters. And I'm like, people would give me 3 pages of stuff.
Although it is not very good at character counts, it won't be very precise. It will sometimes overflow or underflow. So verify that.
I did. It wouldn't let you add the report I was writing wouldn't let you add any extra characters in there. So it would say.
So, yeah.
It would just
Because
stop.
I know people have tried using it to shorten something in abstract down to whatever the requirements are.
Mhm.
And it will often overflow beyond that, as it does with the number of fingers on hand sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely have to check what it is. And somebody posted that a student said something in, and at the bottom it said, is this acceptable, or do you like to try? They forgot to take that part out.
Yes, yeah.
There's a
We've gotten a lot. Right during the last week of the semester, a few faculty members were sending me all these things saying, you know, is this evidence of, you know, that
Yeah.
AI was used. And I said, well, you should probably talk to the student about that.
Yeah, yeah.
We played around with time management and productivity coach. And the initial prompt was something like, I'm a first generation college student. Everybody says I need to start using a planner and Google Calendar, but I can pretty much remember everything from memory. So it explained, some of the differences between high school and college and why it's easy to remember stuff in high school, but not so much in college. And then it gave some great suggestions and offered to create a Google Calendar template, which it did. And one of the things that I thought was great is it told us that we needed to make sure we scheduled in time for personal and self-care, which sometimes students leave that out.
I've
So,
noticed that missing on my calendars too. But,
Yes, things like meals.
yes. Yep. And winding down before bed, like you can't study right up until you go to bed because then you're going to have trouble falling asleep.
now, one thing though is if you do use it to create materials, it will ask you if you are logged in with an Oswego account, if you want to download the materials in a Brightspace format. And it will look as if it's creating either a CSV file or a zip file. Unfortunately, it doesn't work when you try uploading it. It's not clear if that's because they're not generating it correctly, or if it's because the multi-tenant instance limits the way in which we can upload materials from our individual institutions. So I know we generally do not have the ability to upload CSV files. Only the system administrators, which there's a few of them here on campus, can do that, but I don't know if it, but in any case, if it tries telling you to upload something, ignore that. Just download it as a Word file and copy and paste it over, or just copy and paste it directly from the output.
John, this asked us if we wanted it to create a sample.ics calendar file. And it said it can provide a Google Drive or Dropbox link. Have you seen anything like that?
ICS files is a common interchange calendar format that should work with Google, and it should work with Outlook and most other formats.
Okay.
So basically, if you double click on it while you're in a calendar or in an email, it should be able to open it and save it as a calendar invite. That's why when you get calendar invites sent from, from Zoom or other things, they usually come in as an ICS file.
Interesting.
And they work with most calendar programs. I don't remember what ICS stands for, but it's a standard format.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, whether it works or not is different. But
yeah.
So is anyone creating a GPT? I mean, we could talk more about them if you wanted. I wanted to make sure we had enough time for everyone to play with us, but. Javed or Paul, are you creating a GPT?
I'm just screwing around.
Okay. And I'm not sure who Miss Fortu is. Are you creating a GPT? I mean, we could talk more about creating these if you'd like. So Javed, you're not creating one, or are you?
I'm just working on it, I'm trying to. I think I know the idea, what I need to do, but I'm trying to just be as specific as possible.
Oh, okay. It's okay. So you're making one for fitness. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, and are you doing one for your class, Javed?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll let you go back to working on it, and everyone else explore the ones that are there. And if there's anything we can help you with, just ask. Among the other things people created, we had a librarian there who created a question chatbot for the library, talking about library resources, trained on the materials on the website. We had someone create a translation app that would accept input and translate it into other languages. We had some people try to come up with ways of giving students scaffolded assignments, taking assignments and breaking them up into scaffolded steps and stages, and so on.
Wonder if there's an active learning GPT, like an active learning activities one, because that could be a cool resource for a lot of different people.
And that's a good question.
Mhm.
We can look.
Let me search.
And if there's not one, then not that hard to create.
Oh, yep. Active learning guide, active learning expert. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think would be.
There's a whole bunch.
And a really simple thing is to upload your syllabus or your learning objective and ask it to suggest active learning activities. And you can even suggest instruction sheets for students. You could also use it to create a tilt format, where it has a purpose and the tasks and the criteria and so forth. So. And it does a really nice job of all those things. And if you tell it how long your class is and what your objectives are for that day, it can even come up with a schedule of how much time to spend on each activity. And if you don't like it, ask it to change. One of the things that surprises a lot of people, including myself, when I first tried this, is just how easy it is to create these things.
And there are some really excellent examples in that Teaching with ChatGPT book that we just went through this past semester. I mean, some of the prompts are so detailed, but they're so good, and really easy to kind of change to whatever you're doing in your classroom.
And even if you were not part of the reading group, all the prompts are online, and I'll put a link in the chat. I'll just get them in a second.
Yes, they have a companion site that's helpful.
Including all those long prompts, and they're great starting points. And the link is in the chat. And basically, if there's a prompt that you really like, you can always save it as the basis of a GPT and just modify it however you want, and you'll always have it. Does anyone want to share their GPTs? Either drop it in chat or talk about what you've done and how it's working, or any GPTs you found that were useful. And if you do create one for your students, just remind them they do need to have a ChatGPT account. It can be free, but they do need to create an account because you can't do it without logging into ChatGPT. And the only difference really between the paid and the free versions is the number of queries you can make. Pretty much nearly everything you can do with the paid account, you can do with the free account, just not as often or not as long.
These are fun. Thanks for showing us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every time I come to one of these videos, I get a little bit, or these things, I get a little bit more information on how to use it. GPT, and I guess I do have one question. I know
Sure.
you talked about ChatGPT and we talked about, what was the other one that Sudie's working on?
Well,
To be determined.
well, right. They encourage the use of Microsoft because a lot of campuses, they're trying to force everyone to move over or nudge everyone to move over to Microsoft, which is why it's so hard to access things in these shared groups now.
Okay,
But so they encourage Copilot because
Copilot, that's what I was thinking.
they like to use Microsoft in the system office because they don't actually teach or do as much collaborative work as we do on campuses.
Well, I'm just wondering, when you're using it, you know, I try not to add too much information about like names or anything like that. Is there one that's a little bit better to use?
No, pretty much all of them will be trained. Pretty much all of them will use any information as part of its training database in some way.
Okay.
or other. So in general, you should not upload student information. Some people might create a chatbot to assist in providing students with feedback on their work, or some might even use it to assist in giving preliminary feedback themselves. But if you upload student work, which is questionable because of intellectual property and so on,
Sure.
make sure it doesn't include names or personal information about the students. Just
Okay,
because that could be released at some point in the future, you know.
okay.
It
But
was-
it's okay to, I mean, we use Oswego and everything, so like putting the
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
institution information and stuff, just not, okay. Just
that
curious.
would not provide any unique personally identifiable information that might,
Mhm.
Just as long as, some students will upload their resumes or something similar. It's best to encourage them, if they do that, to remove their name and address and other information, just so it's not, part of
Right,
the training database, unless they want to be out there
Right.
and known in some way.
Okay. That makes
I will
sense.
often prompt as well, something like, like I teach writing at a college or something like that, to give it a little bit of context, but like not
Or a
super
public
specific.
comprehensive college or
Right,
something,
exactly,
yeah.
at a four-year institution or whatever.
With a diverse student population.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Yeah, generic background information is good, just don't make it too specific.
Sure.
Okay, anyone have anything else to share? Chatbots you've created or explored?
I have a GPT that's currently helping me train for a half marathon. Last time I ran a half marathon, I just added an extra mile every week, which wasn't the best way to do it, but it like got it done. So it's customizing a workout plan for me based on my current fitness and endurance levels.
There you go.
Yep, pretty cool.
Customized training programs or even tutorials on learning how to do something, it will do pretty nicely.
Yeah.
So. Okay, well, we can stop here then. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Stephanie or anyone else who works with this stuff. And we're happy to help, because this stuff is kind of fun and it can be really useful. And again, we can develop some really nice supports for students. So. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.